Hi there, my name's Jaden. This is my contact information here, my portfolio site, which is still under development, but I'd love to hear your feedback if you want to shoot me a message at my LinkedIn there, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you guys. It's a picture of me. This talk is called Thinking Like an Amateur, and because I'm not on Twitter, I'm obviously qualified to give a talk about amateur development. We're talking about Next.JS here. A lot of people tend to conflate amateur and inexperienced. And I'm guilty of that too. It's not exactly an apples to apples comparison. Here's the difference. If you are inexperienced, that's not a flaw or a mindset. It's just a product of your time and your practice, right? So if you and 3 other people all put in identical amounts of time and practice, you will all have the same amount of experience. It's more of a mathematical thing, right? Being an amateur isn't quite the same thing. It's not exactly an apples to apples comparison, because while inexperience is, you can do math on it, amateur is more of a way of thinking. It's a tool that we can use when it's necessary, and you and those 3 other people that have the same amount of experience are going to go about solving problems different ways. And I wanted to demonstrate this because we tend to look down on amateurs a little bit. What I did is I created a Next.js site for my favorite band, the Oh Hellos. It's right here. It's just on my local host right now, running a Netlify dev. This is going to be hosted on Netlify. I'll put the link in the chat, hopefully. This is their real website, so I copied a lot of the content. They used a lot of the features and the techniques that more advanced developers are going to use. Thing is, we might look at that as elegant. I was talking with Chris McCrae from Forestry over Slack a while back, and I thought this was great. He said this sort of thing has the illusion of elegance. I thought that was a great way of putting it. Kind of reminded me of my favorite poem, the one that actually got me into programming in the first place, the Zen of Python. I'm sure you guys remember that. Tim Peters said that simple is better than complex, and complex is better than complicated. And I thought the way that Python is constructed is a great example of it, because it works really well with amateurs. It's not necessarily a bad thing, like I said. So why don't we try and apply some of that Pythonista amateur mindset to the web development world? We're going to split amateur hour into 3 acts. First of all, what does it make sense for a third party to do? Now, think back to the Jamstack versus WordPress argument. Feels like forever ago, but just bear with me. The whole argument against the Jamstack was that when you combine all these third-party APIs and services without the security of something like a WordPress plugin, you're just exposing yourself to fragility and extra complexity. And to a certain extent, that's right. We're not going to say that the Jamstack is flawless, but the idea here is that we have to be balanced. Because it's not just that we have these third-party services, it's that overuse of them leads to fragility and complexity. Take my app here, for example. Made this site for the Oh Hellos. That's the band, some of the content from their site. And then down here I have a contact form. Added some CSS transitions that I like. They fill out the form, click send message, and this is the code down here. It would get posted to the contact.js function right here. Now, I didn't bother going out and setting all of this up because it's very complicated. We see here, like I'm importing NodeMailer. I was going to set up a whole thing where I push it to Fauna. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You want to send an email to the band to let them know that someone tried to contact them. You probably want to keep track of that in some sort of database like Fauna. So it seems like a good plan. And for an expert developer, you might go through, you set up your SMTP host somewhere, you try and connect to it from NodeMailer, and then pushing to Fauna. Now, this isn't railing against the NodeMailer or Fauna, because I actually use Fauna all the time. The problem is we only need to use it when it's necessary. and it's not really necessary here. Right? Neither is node mailer. This is a lot of complexity. We're adding in 2 third-party services and opening up, ways to be insecure, ways to make our whole system fragile and complex, very difficult to maintain. So, here's the problem here. It kind of counteracts the positives of using the Jamstack in the first place. Just go back to Perl or something like that if you're going to try and do something like this. If you think about how an amateur would handle it, you're going to say, I don't know how to do all that SMTP protocol, whatnot, nonsense. I'm just going to use the tool that lets me do the least amount of coding. And that's Netlify Forms. It's being, very well advertised to us. It's right there in my, host. I'm using Netlify here. So all I got to do, come down here and use the Netlify attribute. Earlier I had like an action /.netlify/function/contact. Just put the Netlify attribute and boom, problem solved. Now it's going to, whenever I fill out this form, it sends me the email, keeps track of it in Netlify. It's a perfect amateur solution. You got to remember, amateur isn't necessarily a bad thing. In this case, it saves us from a lot of complexity and fragility. Act 2 of Amateur Hour. What should be a component? Let's go back to this right here. This up front. It's kind of irrelevant, but it's part of their designs for their last 4 EPs, kind of like a series of the seasons. So it's like in a circle here. I added all of these graphics in. As an expert developer, how many components do you think you're looking at right now? Not including this text up here. I'll give you a second. Did you count them? Did you count the components? See, an expert developer would say, there's the page component, there's this box here, there's the ring inside of the box, there's the bunny, there's the bug, there's the bear, there's the bird. Maybe this wheat is like another component, maybe it's part of the bird, maybe they're together, maybe there's a bird component, a wheat component, and then there's a bird and wheat component. An expert developer, we're kind of used to breaking things down into little tiny pieces. What is an amateur going to say here? They're going to say, that's an album cover. It's just one thing. It's a logical one thing. If you think about how, we were introduced to React, at the very beginning, they said components let you split the UI into independent, reusable pieces, and think about each piece in isolation. That's directly from the React website, and the keyword there is reusable. Right now, those components, they're all there, but it's kind of making it harder to maintain. I'm not going to reuse the bear. I'm going to be reusing the whole album cover, but not just the bear. It just kind of makes it more confusing to create new components, to break it down further. You peak at a certain point with maintainability, and then you start going back downhill again when you overcomplicate things. So how is an amateur going to handle it? Like I said, they're going to say that's an album cover. They're going to make it one component, which I did here. You can see what I had earlier. I had it separated into 5 different components, and now I just have it in one. The album series component. I made sure to import that as well. And all of the proper resizing CSS, if I were to stretch this out, you can see it kind of does its resizing thing. Now all of that is compartmentalized into one CSS module. Right. Act 3, when do we use new features? I'm kind of guilty of this too, but we tend to hear new features and we say, I'm going to wait till that gets a little bit more adoption. I'm going to wait till the community agrees that it's a good tool. We tend to pass the blame on the community. But that's not a great way to look at things. I'm guilty of it. But how's it going to gain more adoption if everybody says, I'm going to wait until it gains more adoption? We're holding ourselves and the whole industry back with us. For example, just take these top 3 questions. How many of us use WebP images regularly? Do we customize our content security policy headers? Do we use area attributes in every website we make? I don't. I'm sure I'm not the only one. WebP images are definitely gaining more adoption. I try to use those as much as possible, but these are things that we should be doing maybe a little bit more often. They're newer things that we should be doing. Maybe we've just kind of held ourselves back and held the industry back with us. These last three, using old stuff. When was the last time you used jQuery? If it was yesterday, you might want to rethink that. Do you still support Internet Explorer? Well, you might be missing out on the brand new features that 99.9% of all internet users can use, because you're counting on that tiny portion of your audience that, that one user that never got out of 1998. Using the CommonJS require syntax, stuff like that that's going out of date. If you think about how an amateur would handle it, they often have tech OCD. They're kind of bouncing around between things. We, as people just trying to tap into that mindset, can control that tech OCD and consciously incorporate the newest tech into our newest sites. For example, this image right here, the band, I've got, there it is, an image component. Plain and simple, normal stuff. Well, I'm going to use WebP because that's the new option. And you know what? I've also imported the Next.JS image component, if I can the right capitalization there. Now it doesn't look any different, but now it's using the best practices. It's there. An amateur is going to say, I'm going to use that because it's there. I'm going to jump on the train of the newest technology because it's there to benefit me. Just like the Next.js image component that came out in October, but it doesn't have 100% adoption like it should. Just think about it. There have been many important amateurs, right? There are a lot of people that pioneered things. Like I was thinking the father of genetics was a nun. The father of American archaeology was a politician. The guy who discovered the planet Uranus was a cellist. There have been many important amateurs, and they dabbled in whatever thing made them famous or whatever thing they helped to make the world a better place. So maybe it would be a little bit presumptuous of us to just kind of dismiss that amateur mindset. We have the power to use it as a tool, and when it's used in the right amounts and in the right places, it's going to increase productivity, it's going to increase creativity, and that's something I think we can all get behind.